Welcome to the second episode of the new podcast MedTech NOW, where we discuss current trends and problems in the medical device industry. Today, we plan to talk about one of the hottest topics in MedTech since MDR and IVDR regulations have been introduced, a medical device certification. These figures I'd like to talk about for a moment have been taken from the MedTech Europe survey report, and they could show how huge the shift is. For example, MDR certificates have not yet been issued for more than 85% of the over 500,000 devices previously certified under the MDD or AIMDD. Moreover, 54% of survey respondents said that they do not intend to transition some of their portfolio to the MDR. All product categories are impacted by potential device discontinuations. Third, at least 15% up to 30% of SMEs still have no access to an MDR designated notified body. For SMEs, progress to MDR certification is slower than average, which is very disturbing. MDR is currently disincentive against launching medical devices in the EU. Approximately 50% of respondents are deprioritizing the EU market, or will do so, as the geography of choice for first regulatory approval of their new devices. Is getting a certificate for a medical innovation that hard or expensive? So let's talk about it, because I think this is a very important topic for product owners, for MedTech startup founders. And my guest today, Kinga Kierepka, Head of Quality Assurance at Consonance, a company which creates innovative medical devices and help to certify them. Good morning, Kinga.
Hello, Paweł. Hello, listeners.
What do you think about these figures?
So the numbers you have quoted are very disturbing, because many companies from the medtech industry are facing now or will soon face a very serious decision. What next with medical devices that they already have in portfolios, or with the new medical devices they want to develop? Because the problem is not only the availability of notified bodies, but also a very large increase in costs related to the medical device certification process. So, in my opinion, availability of notified bodies, costs, and duration of the certification process, these are factors that unfortunately may just discourage manufacturers to introduce new medical devices to the market.
Before we dig deeper, tell listeners, what is the purpose of your role in Consonance projects?
Yes, so in Consonance, I am a quality manager, and also I am a person responsible for the regulatory compliance of medical devices. So my responsibility is to control whether all projects, assumptions, and its implementation comply with the applicable standards and regulations. So together with my team, we try to define a certification route that allows to obtain a CE mark for medical devices.
Yeah, CE mark. So we see this on various devices, and medical devices are included. What this CE mark stands for?
The CE mark is a certain declaration of the manufacturer that his product meets all of the requirements of the directives or regulations that apply to this device. So I once heard an interesting statement that CE mark is like the level line from which the quality and safety begin. So anything below this line may be potentially dangerous.
So basically we should check before making a purchase. We need to check, do we have a CE mark on the device? Yeah, because
Yes.
if there isn't any, that device is not comply with anything.
If our device have this sign, we know that this device can be legally sold. So to obtain it, the manufacturer have to undergo some conformity assessment procedures, and you are sure that the device is safe and it meets all the regulatory requirements.
It takes time to complete the medical certification, and I know that any startup or big multinational pharma company can skip. So please tell us which steps everyone needs to take.
So, it is hard to describe the entire certification path in just a few seconds. So we could talk about it for hours. However, I will try to explain it as briefly as possible. So what the manufacturer must start with is making sure that his device definitely meets the definition of a medical device. So consider the intended use of the device and compare it with the definition in MDR. The next step, when it is certain that we are dealing with a medical device, we proceed to classification. We have 4 main risk classes: class 1, 2A, 2B, and class 3. The higher the class, the higher the risk associated with the product. So in the next step, it is necessary to consider what standards and legal documents apply to our product. We need to identify our requirements. After that, we move on to real action, and we have to prepare some technical documentation of the product. So the technical documentations these are dozens of documents to show that the product meets the essential requirements.
So we won't take the process with let's say a pitch, dozens of pages.
It depends, but in most cases, there are just many documents divided into some segments, some parts.
There is something like MDR and IVDR, and the last thing is, well, it seems to be a bit more complicated, or is it?
I don't really find it more complicated because these are medical devices, but with a slightly more specific intended purpose. When we say IVD, we mean in vitro diagnostic devices. So the expression in vitro in Latina means in glass, and I think that it should make the subject more clear, because IVD devices are devices that are used to detect or to determine the concentration of a specific analyte in human samples, for example, in saliva, in blood, or in tissue sections. So every time we do take something from a patient, to perform a diagnosis, we need to consider whether we also do not meet the definition of a device contained in the IVD regulation.
We are at the point where most projects struggle. The classification of medical devices and in vitro devices. And how does it influence projects and costs?
So the proper classification is super important, because the product class will determine which conformity assessment procedure we should choose and what requirements are for the device. Medical devices can be classified to class 1, 2A, 2B, or class 3. The MDR regulation defines 22 rules on this basis, of which the class is determined. So in order to correctly classify a product, we need to know the details of its operation. We have to find answer for some very important questions, like, is it invasive or is it active, or how long does the device come into contact with patient or users? So you asked me about the time and costs, and the biggest difference we can see between class 1 products and other products, because if you are a manufacturer of class 1 medical device, you conduct all conformity assessments entirely by yourself. The notified body is not involved in the process, and you do not undergo any audit. So for these reasons, the process is much faster and cheaper. I think that it is worth noting that IVD products have some different classification because we distinguish classes A, B, C, and D. And here, as in MDR, the higher the class is, the greater is the risk associated with the product. So IVDR defines 7 rules according to which we classified the device. Compared to 22 rules in MDR, this seems to be low, but I think they are really tailored.
Okay, so let's think for a moment about a hypothetical device. I'd like to measure blood pressure. And I'd like to use a small, simple medical device with some electronics inside and external power source. So, what do you think which class that would be?
For me, it should be class 2A. If this is the very small device, it's not invasive and it's active. And this is something like diagnostic device, something to monitor some parameters. So in my opinion, it would be a class 2A, but as I said, we need to know many details about the operation, and it's hard to define the class just like this. So okay. This is my intuition.
Yeah, this was just a test for you. I remember from one of the trainings that you have performed that you use something like harmonized standards. So I'd like to stick for a moment on this subject. Well, harmonized standards and legislation is a big thing, let's say. So I'm a rookie, just founded a MedTech startup because of my own health issues, let's say. So I pay attention mostly to get money from a venture capital or angel investor, and I'd like to create a killer pitch. Why I should care more about regulatory stuff now and somehow implement this to my pitch? Would it make an impact on the project, budget, and timeline?
So the earlier we recognize the requirements for our product, the more certain we can be that nothing will surprise us during the certification process. So imagine that you have a ready device. You spent a lot of time, a lot of money designing it, and suddenly it turns out that you don't take into account the regulatory requirements. So you do not know the standards. The device that was created does not pass any accredited tests. And now you have to redesign the whole thing. So you need to spend more money and more time to do this. Standards very often impose and precisely define how device should be constructed, what measurement ranges it should have, and for example, how the materials can be used to make the product safe. So knowing and understanding the requirements for your medical device can therefore help you save money and time.
Yeah, so basically, the earlier you get certain information, the more money you save. And for sure, I think investors should also more take care about the stuff and ask founders about regulation path. So that's extremely important piece of information. The other thing, quality management system, usually known by like ISO. So is quality management system a must-have if I'd like to introduce a medical device? And what is that famous ISO 13485 standard all about?
So the quality management system is an absolute must-have for manufacturers because each manufacturer is required to implement, document, maintain, and improve quality management system. Such system must be adequate to the device we have, and the implementation of the system allows to compliance with the essential requirements that described in medical device regulations. So the famous standards you mentioned is actually for me a recipe for the system. It is a standard harmonized with MDR, so it means that on its basis we can demonstrate compliance with the requirements.
if we have it, we show to notified body or any auditor that, or even our clients, okay, we stick to the regulation. We have ISO 13485, so our device is safer, and our company is safer.
Yes, you show that the company works in very organized way.
Also, another thing extremely important in the process of introducing medical innovation on the market is a thing called clinical trials. And these clinical trials should confirm that our medical device is safe and effective from the medical point of view. Well, that sounds quite expensive because usually clinical trials takes a lot of time. Are they required for every medical project?
And not every device requires clinical trials. In many cases, we can base our clinical assessment on the literature. And so we only need to fulfill one super important condition. We need to find a reference devices. Reference devices are devices that work on the same principles, have the same intended purpose and conditions of use as our product. So such assessment requires a critical review of the available literature and the comparative analysis. You have to prove that you have found data that will confirm both the safety and effective of the device. When our device is complete innovation, never tested before, something that cannot be found on the market, so we must take into account the need to conduct the clinical trials.
Sometimes it takes years, but well, I think about a super innovation that is not on the market yet, and potentially it would be a class 2B of the MDR or even a third class. What do you think? How much time we need to consider before we start to monetize the product?
It's very difficult to say it because clinical trials, it depends on many factors. For example, how many patients we have to involve, how many clinical trial centers we have to open. So it can last from 2 years or 3 years or more.
We talked earlier about technical documentation. That is extremely important in the certification process. And once you have said that, it should be a founder's top of mind. That's kind of boring, actually, but can save business from downfall. What should we document, actually?
All stages of the development of medical device should be documented to understand the design, development, and production process. Technical documentations include some simple documents like product description, user manuals, classification, but also something more detailed like risk analysis, clinical evaluation, some technical drawings, designs, material specification, or some laboratory test results. So in fact, we are talking about any document that helps in demonstrating the compliance of the product with the MDR requirements. Because actually this is the main goal of creating technical documentation. It is to allow for demonstrating the compliance of the product with requirements. This is a collection of evidence.
There are companies called notified bodies and they perform audits. What should we know about it?
So the first thing is that an audit is needed if you are developing a class 2A or higher device, because manufacturer of class 1 medical device don't need to worry about the audits. An audit usually consists of 2 stages. During the first stage, in most cases, the notified body checks the manufacturer's quality management system. The second stage usually takes longer and includes checking the technical documentation of the product. Notified body also engages here some clinical specialists to check the clinical evaluation of the device. If we have a subcontractors, for example, which are responsible for care production process, An audit is also usually planned for him. So at the beginning, we mentioned the problem related to availability of notified bodies. So currently, the conformity assessment process carried out by the notified body may take from 9 to 12 months. So it is worth remembering when we plan the project implementation schedule.
9 to 12 months.
Yes.
Oh, that's quite a long time. If anyone would like to skip a certificate and put a medical device without legal approval, are fines high enough to stop rogue entrepreneurs?
So penalties for non-conforming activities are actually financial penalties, and their amount depends on the national law. So in Poland, for example, for placing a device that does not comply with the MDR essential requirements on the market, penalty is in the range of 20,000 to 5 million Polish zlotys. So the amount of the penalty depends on the risk associated with the product we put on the market.
To make that more clear for people from the Western Europe, for instance, it means that you could get a penalty of from 4,000 euros
to more than 1 million.
More than 1 million euros. Oh, that's
huge.
That's huge. Yes. So, short summary. Thank you, Kinga, for sharing all this information and that you have found time to join me today in the studio. We learned today that MDR and IVDR is a complicated path to get through, and it isn't worth working on this by yourself. And the possibility of failure with a class higher than 1 is very expensive and could rip off your medical innovation before even entering the market. And if you plan anything in the medtech space, you need to consider that this is not like build an app, a mobile app. Consider that process is longer. Sometimes it takes 2, 3, or even 5 years before you get into the market. So if you'd like to learn more about this and you need a support in the regulatory part, or you think about a medtech innovation, get in touch with Consonance and I'm sure you'll find a solution. Thank you for listening. Thank you have been with us. Thank you, Kinga, for a chat.
Thank you, Pavel. It was a great pleasure to be your guest.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.